Imagine playing a horror game where every death on screen becomes real. This isn't just survival, it's a curse that follows you into reality. And at this time, Andy stared at the computer screen with empty eyes, as if his souls and spirits had been taken away by Elizabeth in the game just now. Andy immediately called his good friend John and said that the game he had really tested was too scary, and invited John to come to his house to experience it. After hearing this, John was also excited and readily agreed. He was also a planner at a game company and had a strong interest in horror games. After the call, Andy leaned back in his chair, his neck tilted up. Suddenly, a thunderclap in the sky reminded Andy that it was getting late and he should go back to his room to rest. On the way upstairs, he vaguely heard some noises and screams coming from his roommate's room. With concern, Andy pushed open the door nervously. It turned out to be his roommate and his girlfriend playing a role-playing game. Andy returned to his room and fell asleep peacefully. However, he didn't expect the game to be so intense. Andy's subconscious mind and every cell of his body were engraved with his death. Awakened by the nightmare, Andy, sweating profusely, went downstairs to drink some water. A blurry shadow watched him from behind. Andy had gained ability to locate the person by sound through the game, and soon he could hear the person's footsteps and breathing. Andy shouted loudly in the room. At first, he thought his roommate was messing with something. But it was obvious that it was not them this time. As Andy's face was filled with shock, an iron chain was tied around his neck from behind. At the same time, a dark shadow appeared, pushed him down from the upstairs, and strangled him to death. After that, John received the news of Andy's death, and his mood instantly plummeted to the bottom, because they had been friends since childhood, and even had a life-and-death friendship. At the memorial service, a woman took a picture of John's indescribable expression. She handed the picture to John and said that there were many crying faces at the funeral. Although John did not cry, he looked the saddest one. The two of them quickly started chatting. At this time, Andy's sister also joined in and handed John a briefcase. Inside was the CD called Survival Game. The sister said that the game was too violent and would be thrown away by her parents. She also said that her deceased brother would also want to give it to John. John was at his home with his friends, as well as the blonde girl, Jess, who he met at the memorial service. They were playing the horror game called Survival at John's house this time. At first, John thought it was inappropriate and risky, as it was the last thing Andy do before he died. But John's friend eager him to try his hand at the game. He was a bit of an extreme gamer, and for this hobby, he even opened an internet cafe with his sister, Sarah. They believed that if they could complete this survival game, it would be a tribute to Andy's spirit in heaven. After some thinking, they were soon seated in front of 5 large screens. John's boss, who lived miles away, also registered an account to play. Then, as everyone eagerly dressed up their characters, a gruff voice began a monologue, explaining the game's background. It explained that in the manor called Gruz, there existed a female demon named Elizabeth. Players must annihilate her puppet army and find Elizabeth to uncover the truth. The monologue also emphasized that players must survive. At that moment, a bloodstained female zombie appeared on the road. John fired a crossbow without mercy, killing her. A rose also fell to the ground. According to the game, whenever a player faces a ghost, throwing a rose will save them. They quickly mastered the game and began to slaughter everyone. But as they reached the heart of the manor, their losses became unmanageable, forcing them to retreat into the building and close the doors. In the panic, the boss accidentally separated from the main group. John and his companions arrived at a large hall, while the boss entered a dark basement. He saw a room covered in blood and heard a girl's screams. The boss was frightened. John suggested that if he couldn't get through, he should throw a rose. As the rose landed, the screams abruptly stopped. However, this was the last rose behind the boss. He announced through the microphone that his area seemed to be a torture chamber, covered in blood. Just as the boss relaxed his guard, a woman in red pounced on him from behind and stabbed him to death. The boss determined it was the Countess from the painting. Hearing this, Pilton became excited and wanted to kill him in the torture chamber. At that moment, the boss caught sight of a dark figure passing by the doorway. He guessed it must be security guard trying to scare people. Meanwhile, AJ seriously speculated that perhaps he'd been playing games for too long and was seeing some strange things. The boss then logged off and left the company. As soon as he left, the locked door mysteriously opened, accompanied by a warm, vibrating sound. The boss returned to the office and lay on the floor. It turned out to be the controller he'd been using. With a loud yell from the boss, time quickly shifted to the next morning. John arrived. Police officer was also terrified upon seeing this scene. He tried to rush into the office, but was stopped by an officer. The officer then revealed that his boss had been murdered, a blade piercing his throat. It was clearly a homicide. John also stumbled upon the boss lying dead on the table. They quickly logged into the game and were horrified to see the boss's death, which was identical to his real-life one. After a discussion among John and the other three, they concluded that there was something fishy about the game. Absolutely no more playing. Meanwhile, the gaming enthusiast inside logged in and rushed towards him. Meanwhile, the group outside, remembering that Hunter was still playing, hurried back to the house, only to find him slumped over the screen, motionless. Despite everyone's objection, Hunter relented for the time being. However, the reality was that players had signed the terms of the game before entering, so whether they wanted to play or not was no longer up to them. Everyone went about their business. AJ was assembling computer parts as usual, while Hunter installed a high-powered speaker in his sports car, preparing for a race. However, at that moment, everyone heard and saw visions. First, AJ, who was assembling his computer, noticed a large amount of blood on the keyboard. October, who was wiping the beverage dispenser, caught a glimpse of a ghostly face in the mirror behind her. Then John, who was washing up, suddenly developed a cataract-like vision in his eyes. Hunter, who was repairing his car, heard the sound of horse carriage behind him. At first, everyone thought it was just a case of excessive stress and didn't take it too seriously. But John went to a library and looked up information on the two murders, as well as some rumors about Elizabeth. He discovered that his boss and Andy's roommate had died in exactly the same way. They were both stabbed to death by a pair of large scissors and bled to death. Andy's death was caused by a chain around his throat, which matched the weapon used to kill him in the game. After hearing John's clues, everyone shuddered. October then revealed the story her grandmother had told her about Elizabeth since she was a child. Elizabeth kidnapped hundreds of young girls and drank their blood to maintain her eternal youth. And in the game, the reason mirrors shattered whenever Elizabeth encountered them was because this vicious woman couldn't face her aging face. In the end, Elizabeth was locked in the high tower by the locals, starving to death. The camera cut to Hunter, who was shooting outside, playing music and shouting loudly, but the next second, the sky above her suddenly became overcast, and even a thick layer of white fog appeared on the road. Adjusted the rearview mirror, only to see a little girl pop out from front. Panicking and desperate, he then got out and looked around, but there was no one on the road. Now the car wouldn't start for no apparent reason. He hurriedly called John, telling him he'd broken down on a nearby highway and asking them to come quickly. "I didn't die in the game, baby." The thought that he hadn't died in the game put Hunter's search at ease. However, the carriage of the horses carrying him to death. When John and his group arrived, they saw Hunter lying motionless in front of the car, dead. A dent appeared on his head, suggesting he'd been severely trampled. With sirens blaring, the police arrived and began investigating. John told the detective nearby that the deaths of his friends mirrored the game they played. The detective promised John an investigation, but also warned him. The next time they saw them at a secret crime scene, they'd arrest him. As the two were talking, a nearby deputy, curious and under AJ's instruction, also registered for the game, jokingly remarking, "What's so scary about a game?" Just as the deputy was about to have his head crushed by the torture device, John, upon hearing the noise, rushed over and shut down his computer. The next day, while investigating a game store, the deputy learned that the survival game was still in beta testing and hadn't been released yet. Unable to find any leads, the deputy drove away. Suddenly, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a girl in the back seat. In the blink of an eye, he died in the car after being crushed by a torture device. Meanwhile, the group, seeking to uncover the truth, arrived at Andy's home, where the story begins. John's idea was to find the game developer's address and get to the bottom of the matter. They quickly discovered the company's address from Andy's phone on Cypress Street, 50 kilometers away. As they packed up and headed out, they discovered the game was still running on their laptop. They all claimed they hadn't touched the computer, and October's game character appeared on the screen. She was deeply saddened by the death of her brother Hunter and was walking and smoking outside when she suddenly saw a person appear in a nearby renovated house. She looked like a girl from the game. October threw away her cigarette, but without a second thought, and walked in. She also picked up a hammer and 3 nails with her. They said that as long as 3 nails were hammered into the corresponding parts of the deceased body, she could control her. But the Elizabeth who appeared at this time was not her real body at all, but her soul, so the nails naturally could not be hammered into her body. During her escape, October was also hooked by Elizabeth with an iron hook and hung in the air. When John and his group heard the scream and rushed over, October had already had her throat cut and fell in a pool of blood. After that, John and his group carried out their plan as usual and rushed to this place called Cypress Street. However, this place was dead silent and did not look like a company at all. John and Jesse went into the company. AJ controlled the computer and played a survival game. Instead of letting fate be in the hands of the devil, it is better to control your own fate and defeat the devil. The building on this side was deserted, filled with rubbish and the most strange puppets and dolls. Jesse and John also discovered that the layout of the house mirrored many areas in the game. Later, with guidance from AJ, who was playing the game on the other side, they found a cemetery that was exactly the same as the one in the game. This cemetery stretched for dozens of miles, and in the center, an ancient tower appeared in John's sight. It turned out that this was not a game company at all, but Elizabeth's mansion. Her true form should now be inside the tower. However, before entering, AJ urged John and Jesse to bring gasoline and nails to scare away demons. If the nails didn't work, they could ignite the gasoline and incinerate Elizabeth's true form, as fire was also deadly to demons. But just as he had given these instructions, the car handle suddenly began to shake violently, and then the door slammed shut, locking AJ out. He stared at the computer screen nervously. The pause game had suddenly started again, and a carriage was about to run over AJ. There was no way out. He had no choice but to dive into the jungle ahead and run all the way, while Elizabeth drove the carriage in pursuit. In a panic, AJ fell into a pile of weeds, and roses were blooming around. When John rushed to the car, the screen showed that AJ had died. They were still a step too late. Although they were extremely heartbroken, they had to prepare their tools as soon as possible and set out to kill Elizabeth. But at this moment, the sound of horses was heard again in the distance. Elizabeth was already chasing them. At the critical moment, John opened the door to the tower in time, but he did not go in himself. Instead, he turned around and took out a rose from her bag. He wanted to try whether this thing would work in the real world. And it worked. Then the two began to search inside the tower. During this period, many zombie puppets also came towards John and Jesse. Throwing the rose saved them from danger. When he ran to a room, the iron door suddenly closed, locking Jesse inside and blocking John outside. Jesse told John not to worry about her and to quickly go inside the tower to find Elizabeth's true body, saying that they didn't have much time. Helplessly, John had to leave as well and handed the last life-saving rose on his body to Jesse. Not long after, in a bedroom at the top of the tower, John slowly lifted the bed curtain and finally found Elizabeth lying inside. John couldn't help but sweat and his heart beat faster. He took out 3 nails from his bag and nailed them into Elizabeth's body. The 3 nails also fell out of her body one by one. Unexpectedly, this trick was a way to summon the soul back to the host's body. At the critical moment, John picked up the laptop that looked like a mirror in his hand. Elizabeth saw her own horrible appearance and couldn't help but scream wildly. This gave John the opportunity to ignite the gasoline that had already poured on the ground. Suddenly, the room was engulfed in flames. Elizabeth was also burned by the flames and began to scream weakly, but at the same time, she locked the door, trapping John inside. Fortunately, just as the fire was about to reach them, AJ kicked open the door and rushed over with a bunch of roses. In the end, the 3 of them completed their mission with great difficulty, burning Elizabeth to death in the tower and lifting the curse. However, at the end of the movie, this game called Survival was actually available in major stores. When players recited the prayer before entering the game, the curse took effect again, and Elizabeth was resurrected, continuing to face the challenges of the players.